By the end of this video, you're going to know the main drivers of what makes someone's retirement fail and what drives people back to work. We're going to break down some of the most common myths and realities of early retirement. So most people think it all comes down to the money. So make sure you stick around to the end because you might be surprised to know one of the main reasons why people go back to work after retiring. Welcome back to the Think Retirement channel. I'm Jonathan Rankin, and I've been helping people plan and execute their retirement for going on 20 years now. Now, the goal of this video is to help give you all the tools that you need to make sure that when you retire, you only have to do it once. So we're going to talk about some of the common myths around early retirement and the realities that you need to plan for. Let's start by addressing one of the most common misconceptions out there, and that is early retirement is a one-size-fits-all solution for everyone. Now, it's tempting to think that early retirement is the ultimate goal, but is it really? It really depends on your own situation. Now, let's break this down. For some, the idea of retiring at 40 or 50 sounds ideal, but for others, continuing to work might provide a sense of purpose and structure that they wouldn't want to give up. So the question really comes down to, what is retirement? Is it as simple as earning enough income from anything other than a salary to maintain your lifestyle? Or is it the freedom to not have to clock in to work every single day? With almost 20 years of helping people retire, what I have found is that early retirement starts out as a search for lifestyle freedom, and then it turns into a financial equation. See, the part that almost all early retirees forget is creating structure and purpose for their time in retirement. See, I know a client who retired at 50, and on paper they had everything planned perfectly. They had enough investments, they had enough savings, they had no debt, but after just 2 years of retirement, they felt like they had lost their identity. They didn't have a driving sense of purpose, and it left them feeling lost and empty. And this happens more often than people realize. See, early retirement isn't just a financial decision, it's a life decision. In fact, a survey by the Federal Reserve, they show that approximately 27% of retirees who return to work said they did so because they felt bored or wanted more of a purpose. So for many, retirement wasn't as fulfilling as they had anticipated, and that led them to seek out employment to regain that sense of structure and social interaction. This is extremely common and something that we're going to dig into a little deeper later on. So before we dive deeper, I want you to think about your why. What is it about retirement that makes you want to retire early? Is it to escape your current job, or is it because you're excited about starting a new chapter? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what motivates you. Now let's talk about the nuts and bolts of early retirement. Your finances. You might hear people think that you need $1 million or $2 million to retire. In fact, a recent study from Northwestern found that US adults believe they need about $1.46 million to retire comfortably, which is 15% more than what they said last year and over 53% more than what they said in 2020. So what is that number? Is there a standard formula that you should be following? There are 3 rules of thumb that people follow, and the first rule is the income replacement rule, which says that in retirement, you should aim to replace 80% of your pre-retirement salary. So if you make $100,000, you would need $80,000 in retirement to cover your expenses. The other is how much in savings you should have based on your age. See, according to Fidelity, at 50, you should have 6 times your salary. And at 55, you should have 7 times, and it keeps going up from there. Unfortunately, there isn't a one-size-fits-all answer. The amount you need depends on your unique situation, and this is especially true with early retirement. Let's take the multiple of your salary rule of thumb. Let's say that you want to retire at 50. Well, the guide tells us that you need 6 times your salary. The problem is that the money has to last you over a decade longer than the average retiree who retires in their 60s. On top of that, the most common savings vehicle is a pre-tax retirement account. So if the majority of your savings is in a 401k, then it will make early retirement even more challenging due to the withdrawal limitations on 401ks under 59.5. And that's why it really depends on your individual lifestyle. So let's break down where you should start. First, you need to calculate your retirement budget. This includes not only your regular living expenses, but also healthcare costs and unexpected expenses and inflation. So here's a quick example. If you plan to live off $60,000 a year and you expect to retire for 30 years, you'll need at least $1.8 million just to cover your living expenses. But what about inflation? See, even with a 2% inflation rate, that $60,000 will be worth much less 20 years from now. So let's say that inflation averages 2% annually. After 20 years, you'll need about $90,000 annually to match that purchasing power. And as we've seen over the past few years, 2% is being very conservative on inflation. This is just a starting point. It doesn't factor in investment growth or changes in lifestyle costs. One thing that separates the mindset of early retirees and the average retiree is that the early retiree tracks their spending and have a documented budget. Budgeting to some is like dieting. They feel it's restrictive and they hate it. Whereas to others, they feel like it's a way of life and it keeps them healthy and secure. For early retirement, it's a necessity. It's a starting point to determine how much in savings you need. For most people, the goal is to only have to retire once and not go back to work. That is why the planning and budgeting is the most important thing that you can do. According to the Trans-America Center for Retirement Studies, they found that 55% of retirees who go back to work cite financial reasons such as insufficient savings as the main driver. So as we're going through this, take a moment to jot down your current savings and multiply that by how long you expect to be retired. Is it enough? If you're not sure, consider using a retirement calculator or use the Start Here link in the description below, and our team would be happy to help you understand exactly what you need to retire comfortably. All right, let's dive into one of the biggest myths about early retirement. That is, if you retire early, you could just live off your investments without worry. It's this idea that you'll set up a comfortable portfolio, maybe throw some money in stocks and let it do all the heavy lifting while you sit back and relax. And that sounds great, right? But here's the reality check. The truth is your investments don't work like magic, and retiring early adds a serious wrinkle to the entire equation: time. You see, when you retire early, you're giving up those extra working years where you could have your savings and your investments continue to grow. Instead, you're starting to withdraw from your portfolio much earlier, and that produces something called sequence of return risk. Let me explain. In a perfect world, the stock market would go up every year and you could just take out 4% of your portfolio without an issue. But the market doesn't work like that. In the real world, there are ups and there are downs, and if you start withdrawing from your portfolio during a down market, right after you retire, your nest egg can take a serious hit. This is especially risky if you retire early because you've got a lot more years to fund. You could end up outliving your money much faster than you planned. Here's a quick example. So imagine retiring in 2007, right before the Great Recession in 2008. You started withdrawing money during the crash, and your portfolio might have shrunk drastically because of the market going down. And recovering from that is so much tougher when you're no longer putting money back into your accounts. So just relying on your investments and hoping the market cooperates isn't a sound strategy. When you retire early, you're going to be spending more years in retirement than someone who retires at 65. So if you're retiring at 55 or even 50, you could have 40 years ahead of you. That means your investments need to last decades, not just the typical 20 to 30 years that most people plan for. Inflation will creep up, healthcare costs are going to rise, and if your portfolio isn't managed carefully, it might not keep pace. The key here is not just about having a good investment strategy, but also about managing risk and understanding that those early years of retirement are critical for the long-term health of your portfolio. The reality is you can't just set it and forget it. When retiring early, you have a longer time frame to cover, which means more potential for market volatility. You can't afford to put all your eggs in one basket. A well-diversified portfolio across different asset classes like stocks, bonds, real estate, and possibly alternative investments, that helps. It helps spread out the risk. This way, if one of the markets takes a hit, your entire portfolio doesn't suffer as much. Think of this as stocks might give you the growth you need, but bonds provide the stability. Adding in some real estate or dividend-paying stocks give you another layer of potential income. And since you're retiring early, you need to keep part of your portfolio in growth-oriented assets like stocks. A lot of people think that once they retire, they should move everything into safe investments like bonds or cash equivalents. But here's the reality. With early retirement, you're going to be in the market for potentially 30 to 40 more years. And inflation will erode your purchasing power. If you don't have enough exposure to growth, which stocks historically offer the highest returns over the long term, which is critical to make sure that your portfolio keeps pace with inflation and lasts as long as you need it. So another important piece of the puzzle is how you withdraw your money. So there are two aspects of this to consider: the tax side of the equation and the sequence of return risk. As I mentioned earlier, withdrawing from your 401k before 59.5 usually comes with a 10% penalty. That's why it's crucial to explore other options like Roth conversions, which allow you to access some of your retirement funds penalty-free under certain conditions. On the other side, one of the best strategies for navigating sequence of return risk is to have a cash buffer. By keeping 2 to 3 years of living expenses in cash or very low-risk liquid investments, you can ride out market downturns without selling your stocks at a loss. When the market is down, you draw from this cash buffer instead of tapping into your portfolio. And this gives your investments time to recover. That's where the bucket approach can come into play. So the bucket approach is a popular strategy for retirees, and it's especially useful for early retirees. So here's how it works. So you break your assets into 3 buckets: short-term, medium-term, and long-term. The short-term bucket, this is where you keep 2 to 3 years of cash for living expenses that's safe from the market volatility. The medium-term bucket, this is for assets that you're going to need in the next 5 to 10 years. It can include more conservative investments like bonds. And then your long-term bucket, this is the growth portion. This is your stocks, real estate, or other high return assets that you're not going to touch for 10 to 20 years. Now, by using this approach, you can ensure that you can ride out the short-term volatility while allowing your long-term investments to grow. Let's dive into this other myth, which is the idea that early retirement is a permanent vacation. And while it's true that you'll have more free time, that doesn't necessarily mean that every day is going to feel like a holiday. It's a huge life adjustment, and many people underestimate how much structure work provides in their life. Many retirees go through a honeymoon phase during those first few months of freedom, and they feel incredible. But once that wears off, and the reality of having 20, 30, or even 40 years ahead of them without a routine of work can feel overwhelming. In fact, a study by the Journal of Economic Psychology showed that many retirees began to struggle with this very issue. See, without a daily routine and the purpose that work provided, they often feel like they've lost a piece of themselves, leading to stress, loneliness, and even depression. Now you might be thinking, okay, but isn't retirement supposed to be relaxing? Sure, but here's the catch. That initial wave of freedom starts to fade, and you might be facing something called social isolation. You see, work doesn't just fill our time, it connects us with other people. And a study from Harvard found that retirees who don't stay socially active experience intense feeling of loneliness that can lead to serious mental health declines. And it turns out being surrounded by coworkers, even the ones that might drive you a little crazy, actually helps keep you connected and grounded. Now let's talk about the mind. So keeping your mind sharp is important, especially as we age. But when we retire early, without a plan for mental engagement, research shows that it can accelerate cognitive decline. In fact, a study by the Journal of Health Economics revealed that retirees who didn't find meaningful activities tend to experience faster memory loss and cognitive issues. So if your days are filled with nothing more than binge watching TV, you might be unintentionally speeding up the aging process in your brain. And here's another surprise: financial stress. See, it's ironic, right? We often work hard because we want to retire early and we want the financial freedom, but many retirees, especially those who retire early, start to feel financial pressure. According to a survey by the Employer Benefit Research Institute, nearly half of retirees worry about running out of money. That's a big deal, especially when you're facing a retirement that could last 30 or even 40 years. Stretching your savings over that time can add a whole new layer of stress. But perhaps the most profound challenge, it's the question about identity. Think about it. For years, your identity has been tied to your job. You've been the doctor, the lawyer, the manager, and suddenly that's gone. And a study by the International Journal of Aging found that early retirees face what psychologists call an identity crisis. Without work, they struggle with the question, who am I now? What is my purpose? It's one of the biggest emotional hurdles that people in early retirement face. Now, I know all this sounds a little too touchy-feely for some, but I can tell you from experience that it will make your early retirement so much more enjoyable if you plan for the mental side of retirement. So to ease the transition, I suggest creating a post-retirement schedule. You might not need a 9-to-5 grind anymore, but having a routine can provide that sense of purpose. You could allocate time for hobbies, physical fitness, learning, volunteering. Think about what excites you and then build your days around that. So take a moment to think about how you'd like to spend your time in your early retirement. Would you travel, start a new hobby, or volunteer? Comment below. I'd love to see how you envision your days. So as you can see, retirement, especially early retirement, is a lot more than just the finances. From lifestyle adjustments to investment strategies, even considering the psychological aspect, there's a lot to think about. For going on 20 years, I've helped people retire, and if I had to boil retirement success down to one thing, it comes down to feeling confident about your retirement plan. The peace of mind that comes with feeling confident makes retirement so much more enjoyable than worrying or stressing about the little things in retirement. The one way to ensure that you enter retirement with confidence is to plan and to stress test that plan. If you haven't done that yet and want to make sure that you're on track, use the Start Here link in the description below and let one of our advisors help you. Until next time, hit that subscribe button, share your story in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.